Thanks for tuning in to another Techstination interview. I'm Fred Fishkin, and with us is Harpreet Singh Rai, CEO of Oura, O-U-R-A, one of the leading companies in the wearable technology business. Very unique. Thanks for joining us, Harpreet.
Thanks for having me, Fred, and glad to be on the show.
Well, give us the description, first of all, of what the Oura Ring is all about.
Yeah. So we make a device called the Oura Ring. I would say most people describe it as a wearable. Um, and really what we do is help users understand and improve their sleep so they can improve their lives. Um, I think really better sleep yields to better health and eventually a better life. And that's what we allow people to do.
So, what is in the ring that allows you to do that?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think, today, if you went to a doctor and said, I wanted to get a sleep test, they would send you to a sleep lab and they hook you up to a device called polysomnography machines, or PSG test as is abbreviated. And that has all types of 16 to 32 different wires hooked up to your head. You got to stay overnight in the sleep lab. And they analyze your brain waves, the speed at which your brain waves are moving throughout the night. And it's been found with science, that these different speeds of the frequency of these waves that your brain's at during the night correlate to something we humans have created called sleep staging. And all different types of things happen during the night when you're sleeping. For example, in deep sleep, a lot of your muscles are repaired. A lot of memory recollection and learning, for example, happens in REM sleep. Another thing that happens at night is if you look at something called tau, or beta amyloid, it happens to be an inflammation plaque that we just have a little bit of every day. And that, for example, is that plaque is washed away at night by your brain's lymphatic system called the glymphatic system, that helps clear toxins and reduces inflammation so you can function properly the next day. And that's very heavily correlated with deep sleep as well. So there's all these miracles that happen to your mind and body during the night, and hence is why sleep is so vital. And the way that we do it, it's a pain in the butt to go to that sleep lab. No one wants to do that, and you're not going to do that every single night. And what we have done is make that a lot easier for consumers. You simply wear this device. We give you 3 scores in an app that pairs to both iOS and Android. And we actually give consumers a little bit of insight and a little bit of information every single day on things that they may be able to do to improve, or things that may have hurt their sleep quality last night. We have a bunch of different sensors in here, LED sensors, movement sensors, accelerometer and gyroscope, temperature sensors as well. And we have trained those sensors in that data stream against all, data from sleep labs. And just like every wearable, frankly, has done, Fitbit has done this. Apple does not do sleep stage tracking, but other devices like Garmin as well. And, I think what we have found is by focusing on sleep and by using the ring form factor, which we believe actually really helps to improve the accuracy of those signals coming from these wearable devices, that we can give consumers really meaningful insights on not just how to improve their sleep, but how to improve their life.
Well, some of the products that you mentioned, some of the watches are very good, but the problem is they're a watch.
Yeah.
Very often they need to they're a lot larger, not always that comfortable to wear in bed. You might be cutting circulation, and the charging factor is important here. Typically, you want to charge up your watch at night. That's when you don't need to be wearing it. So that's an issue there. So how did you manage to get all of this capability? You're doing heart rate, you're doing temperature, these, I don't know how with a ring you're able to tell, how much REM sleep I'm getting, or the different, or how when I'm sleeping deeply. How are you able to tell that with a ring? How do you get it in? First of all the technology in something the size of a ring, along with a
Yeah.
power supply.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question. I think the answer is we have an awesome team all around. Specifically on the hardware team, we have some folks that have worked both mainly on mobile phones and telecommunication systems, which are all about really very similar functions of sort of signal to noise ratio, right? I would say like training data sets as well to make sure that you can account for things like noise in different conditions. It's a lot of the same engineering that happens in telephone systems. Um, and I would say what's interesting about the battery life and sort of the whole ring form factor. It's probably worth noting. Um, your typical watch, as you noted, is uncomfortable to wear to bed, right? And frankly, as you also know, the battery life's really poor. And the reason that is because, if you look at where your watch sits, sort of on this side of your wrist, right, there's a lot of bone there, a lot of muscle mass, and these are veins, right, not arteries. As we know, when we measure a pulse on the inside of the wrist, you can feel that signal. That pulse is really strong. Turns out that pulse goes to your hand, right, and your skin is also very thin, right, hence why your hands have this reddish hue. The blood is so close to the surface of the skin. And what that allows for, or creates, I should say, is a pulse signal that is about 100 times stronger than where your watch sits on your wrist. The combination of the thinner skin, the arteries instead of veins that are closer to the surface, really leads to a much stronger pulse signal. And that means we need way less battery to see the same pulse characteristics that you would on the wrist. And we see that signal so much more clearly. And because of that, the ring form factor has that better signal quality, has that better battery life, and to your point, better usability. Like people don't, people take things off when they go to bed. They don't want to put things on, and so even a watch, when you're cuddling with your loved one or even your dog, whatever it may be, right? It's just not as comfortable to wear to bed as a ring. Um, and so that hopefully that helps describe a little bit of the hardware side and how we fit some of these things in there. Other than it's really hard, and we have a really good team.
So, how did this come about? I mean, what's your background and what led to the creation of Aura?
Yeah. So I'm actually an electrical engineer. I went to University of Michigan. I studied something called MEMS engineering, which is microelectronic mechanical systems, or sort of the predecessor to nanotech. And so some of the things I worked on while in college were a movement sensor, an accelerometer, things that go in everything from the Nintendo Wii controller to your Fitbit, your Apple Watch, and an Oura Ring. And I also worked on, actually a neural implant in doing my master's in my program. I didn't finish my master's, but
Is that the kind of thing Elon Musk is doing?
it was actually very, it would be, yeah, we worked on a neural probe. The idea would be using MEMS technology, how to, make the incision as small as possible to reduce scar tissue when implanting a neural probe into the brain.
I'd
Um,
rather be wearing a ring, but
yeah,
keep
me,
on
me
going.
too. Actually didn't finish my master's. I finished that class, but didn't end up finishing my master's. I actually am not one of the co-founders of Aura. I'm the CEO. I've been the CEO for a few years now. But really, the company was started in Finland, and it was started actually with a handful of engineers from both Nokia and actually also Polar, the company that makes the chest strap, that
Right.
triathletes use. That company is actually Finnish and from the same town, and I think between there's also, unfortunately, because in Finland there's a lack of sun during the winters, right? It's like near the North Pole, it's dark all the time in the winters, and it's sunny all the time in the summers, just like Alaska. And that leads to actually a lot of sleep issues in the Nordic population as a whole. And because of that, Finland's been this unique place of awesome hardware engineering, awesome physiological engineering, like things like Polar, combined with like a deep passion and understanding sleep and health because of all the different, sunlight and eventually circadian rhythm disruption that happens. And so, I think when there's some really good founding first principles, when we were looking at, first of all, wearables as a whole, or health as a whole, it was like what to focus on. You can focus on diet, activity, or sleep. And I think if you take a step back, the one thing we all do, no matter what, every day is basically try to sleep. Only 10% of Americans, or at least pre-COVID, would work out in a given day. But 99.9% of Americans, or everyone in the globe, essentially tries to sleep tonight. And it turns out, if you start looking at the research and science, sleep has even a greater impact on our health, frankly, than activity or diet. And most of us, in fact, sort of think about sleep last. We're like, oh, I got to optimize my workout. I got to optimize, what I eat. Well, it turns out that, everything from your testosterone, if you're a man, from your, from your collagen, for anyone, from all your memories, frankly, to preventing Alzheimer's, dementia, or even cancer, your natural killer T cells that fight off cancer are made in your sleep. And most people don't realize it's sort of, Matthew Walker says this, who's, the author of this book, the best-selling book on sleep called Why We Sleep, and a professor at Berkeley, and also our chief science advisor. He says, sleep is, basically the single best legal performance enhancing drug. And I would add that most of us choose not to take, right? Most of us choose, not to, get a full 8 hours of sleep every night. In fact, we're the only species on Earth that deprives ourselves of sleep. No animal will ever do that naturally. I think technology, unfortunately, has some negative consequences. We've gotten disrupted in our normal habitual ways as a human society. And there's tons and tons of benefits, but I think our change in lifestyle has hurt us.
Is there evidence that the information that you're providing wearers, you're giving me the information about how much I've slept wearing the Oura Ring. You're telling me how restful it is, my readiness level in the morning when I wake up.
Yeah.
Is there evidence that people act on this information to try to get more sleep and
Yeah.
more restful sleep?
It's a great question. So I would say, first of all, most of our users will tell us how much they've improved their sleep and how much more aware they are of it. In terms of anecdotal, that's anecdotally, I mean, we get, hundreds, thousands of messages every day on how we hear, wow, better sleep has allowed me to be more productive and actually get a lot more done at work. How better sleep has actually helped me unlock certain issues in my health. How better sleep has, allowed me to be a better athlete. These are all the stories that we hear every single day from our users. The hard part about the evidence part is what we have found, Fred, is that once you get an Oura Ring, you start getting that data day one. So we sort of don't have a baseline on you pre-Oura. You get Oura Ring and you actually start changing your behavior. I do know there's a professor at UCLA who's done a totally independent review of behavior change in wearables, and I know has submitted those findings to a paper and has told me that he was most impressed, anecdotally, just with Oura Ring. And so, we're waiting for more of that validation to happen by third party, and we've by other third parties, and we've spent a lot of time and resources as a company to be able to provide a lot of stuff for researchers. We were the first wearable actually to launch a study with an academic partner with UCSF during COVID, and so I can't wait for some of that research to get out. But I would say we hear it every single day, maybe every single hour from our users, how much they've learned about their sleep, improved their health. And so far, I would say all the research has been really, really supportive.
Now, you're not doing what Garmin and others are doing when it comes to all the data on activity tracking, but you're giving people an idea if they're moving around enough
Yeah.
and how often they're getting up from the chair.
Yeah. Excuse me. Sorry, I was just drinking some water.
Hydration's important too. Go ahead.
Yeah, another thing we need for our lives. No, so we actually do track activity, but as you noted, we really just focus on steps and general movement. We do give people reminders and set activity goals. Actually, you'll notice that your activity goal in your app every day changes based on how well your sleep and your readiness score is. So days you have higher readiness, you're going to have a higher activity goal, and we actually do give guidance, to people there. And I think we haven't focused on providing sort of heart rate information during your workout. That's definitely something that we'll do more of in the future. But what we have seen with professional athletes, and we partner with the NBA, the UFC, NASCAR, Red Bull Racing, Seattle Mariners, a bunch of different college sports as well. a couple, Formula One teams. We've found that actually athletes, what the S&C coaches, the pros are doing is looking at that recovery data and then using that to actually see how hard should I work out today. And so I think it gets in this idea of actually preventative versus reactive. Like looking at your heart rate in the moment is oftentimes too late. What are you going to do? You're going to slow down your workout, or you're going to try to push yourself harder. We can already tell you that, and our users actually find out how hard to train just by looking at their sleep and recovery data. We have actually started to do a lot more in activity. So now in Oura Ring, you can actually, either use HealthKit or, Google Fit for Android wearers, and we'll start to pull in all that activity from those, other apps. And so all of that is actually then reflected. If you use like a workout app like Garmin or like Strava, or even something like Peloton, and you have it connected to, Apple HealthKit, and we'll pull that data in. And we've actually started now to use that data to suggest to users, automatically with a machine learning model, like, hey, did you just go for a walk or a run, or were you just strength training? Because we can now actually, we've trained it with enough data to start to identify those activities. So we are giving people more guidance on activity, but I would actually note that really the key use case is if you sleep better, if you recover better, we'll give you a harder activity target the next day. And that really helps people understand how hard they should push themselves each day physically.
Well, you mentioned the partnership with the NBA and other pro athletes, and this ties in with COVID,
Yeah.
which you also made mention of. So tell me what's happened. I mean, over the last year, when it comes to Aura and this whole idea of helping with the pandemic.
Yeah. Look, I think so we have three, for your listeners, right? We have three that don't probably notice. We have three scores in the app. We have this main score called readiness that, Fred, you were describing before, and we were all comparing our readiness scores before we started the recording. And we have a sleep score and we have an activity score. Within that readiness score, we have a couple physiological signals from your body that happen to have and fluctuate quite a bit when you're getting sick. So, is your heart rate elevated? Is your heart rate variability, which is a sign of stress, changing or decreasing? Is your temperature? We're actually, been the only wearable to have temperature sensors in our device since day one. Apple Watches don't have temperature sensors in them, and even Fitbit didn't before COVID, and now others are starting to implement that. And we also see respiration rate. And so what happens in the readiness score, what we've found every single year during flu season, is users reach out to us and they say, hey, all of a sudden my readiness score, Fred, you were talking about your 95 earlier, my readiness score has dropped to 50 or 40 or 30 or 60, whatever it may be. And I noticed that my body temperature was elevated a degree, or my respiratory rate was up 20%, or my heart rate, was up, to 10 beats higher than normal per night. And so we've seen that behavior every year during flu season. And we've sort of always joked that, people can tell that they're getting sick from the data before they even feel symptoms. Well, I think those stories took on a whole new meaning. And those that user feedback took on a whole new meaning during COVID. So when, COVID hit, us as a company, like every company, was trying to figure out what can we do to help. And, we felt like we knew that we have a little bit richer data sets on some of these things like heart rate variability, respiratory rate, and temperature being the key one that other wearables don't. We got to study this, and if we can actually see if people are getting sick before they feel symptoms, wow, we can alert people to sort of, stay home, stop the spread, take it easy. And we felt like actually, partnering with a research institution like UCSF, who we've already done studies with before, nothing could be better. And frankly, I think UCSF had, the researchers there had the really bright idea that we should get these rings to as many frontline healthcare workers as we could. They're going to be in the COVID, wards. They're going to be the ones most exposed. And so that's what we did. We kicked off a research study. We're the first wearable to do it during COVID. 3,000 frontline healthcare workers across the country at a bunch of different hospitals. We donated rings to, and they enrolled in the study. And then we opened that to our whole user base. And we eventually had over 70,000 users enroll in their study and contribute their data. And, the early findings actually were published in a journal in an open medical journal at the end of December. And what they basically showed was, we took the first 50 positive COVID cases. And what the data showed is that on 38 of those 50 subjects, there's significant changes in Oura data before 3 days before people feel symptoms. And I mean, that's huge, right? Like I think no wearable has shown that significant of a percentage of a user base or amount of subjects that has a significant change up to 3 days before. And we're also doing research with West Virginia University, the Rockefeller Neuroscience Institute, and they actually put out a press release saying the same finding. And I think we will now have another follow-up study at UCSF that continued all throughout the winter, and now that'll have hundreds of cases in that data set. So we think that could be really, really meaningful. And what happened is, since we were the first wearable to do that, and the data looks so much more granular, and things like temperature were in there, I think a lot of the sports teams and leagues, as they're trying to figure out how to get back to work, wanted to use new technology. So the NBA contacted us, and sort of crazy, pinching myself as a startup seeing that happen, but they were blown away by this early data. They were trying to figure out how to reopen the NBA in a bubble, and we were able to partner with them and get thousands of Oura Rings to the bubble in Florida when they did that. And the same thing with UFC, and the same thing with NASCAR and many other sports leagues and teams. But that all came out of the research that we were doing with UCSF.
And one of the great things about it too, the Oura Ring, is the battery life on it, 4 or 5 days, that you just put it for while you're watching TV or something, put it on a charger for 90 minutes or so, and you're good for another 5 days, something like that. And then you can still be wearing it when you sleep and when you're active during the day. So that's a big plus, and one of the reasons why I think a lot of people wearing other fitness wearables kind of fall by the wayside sometimes is the need to keep it charged, and
Yeah.
when do I take it off, when do I put it on, that kind of thing. You've really come a long way in solving that kind of problem, whether it's for seniors or others. So
Yeah. No, I think usability, I think often we forget that, like, making any change for people is hard, right? Trying something new is hard. Stepping on the scale every morning is something new that people who are trying to lose weight have to remember to do if they really want to track it. So I think doing any type of diet modifications and creating food logs, a lot of work. And I think sometimes that friction, making it hard, is what really, unfortunately, causes people to drop off some of those initiatives that can improve their health. And so making a product easy to use so it's seamless, people tell us all the time, I forget the ring's even there. And we love that, because we think that means, like, oh wow, it's really integrated in their life. It's not annoying. It's not an obtrusive thing. You don't have to charge a battery every single day, like you do on an Apple Watch. And so I think, yeah, that usability is just huge.
and it's fine in the shower or in the pool, right?
Yeah, waterproof. Yeah, you can dive with it. So
Terrific. So any thoughts about where you want to take this from here? Are there other new capabilities, new things you want to do?
yeah, I mean, I think the whole industry is going from something I describe as, wearables 1.0 to wearables 2.0. I think wearables 1.0 was, basic sensors and things like steps, right? Credit, where credit's due, Fitbit was a pioneer here, right? They took an accelerometer, a movement sensor, and they moved it from sort of a, pedometer step tracker that you used to wear around your belt to a really easy to use form factor like a watch, right? Hundreds of millions, billions of people wear watches every day. Why not put this tiny little sensor in there and have it be sort of a smartwatch, right? And so I think that was really, really smart. But I think, that activity use case is really interesting. I think the use cases of the future for wearables is health, right? And that means better quality data, more independent research, really getting the best quality of signals. And we've seen all types of wearables starting to attack this. I think Apple's been a pioneer here in their work on cardiovascular disease, in particular AFib, right? It affects 2% of the population. Most people don't know or when an AFib event is happening. I think the Apple Watch is fascinating technology for that. I think we just did a lot of work around illness, and it's not just unfortunately, the 500,000 people that have passed in the U.S. this year, obviously that's insane. That's tragic, right? But almost every year, nearly 50,000 people pass away in the U.S. because of flu-related, complications. And frankly, it doesn't have to be that way. We know it's human-to-human contact, and we know it mainly happens in the workplace. So imagine a future where if it looks like you may be getting sick, even before you feel symptoms, you're alerted so you can keep your coworkers and your loved ones safe. I think sleep apnea is really interesting. I think even Samsung is doing some work in Korea with blood pressure, and using the Samsung Galaxy Gear Watch. So I think we're evolving from steps and something that's sort of novel. It's helpful, right? But into broader, longer term healthcare and these healthcare issues.
Does that mean you look beyond the ring, or just what does that
No,
mean?
I actually think the ring is, in fact, the best place to do all of those things. That same quality of data quality and the pulse signal, that allows us to see actually those variations, whether it's sleep apnea, hypertension, or AFib, actually at a more granular level than the other wearables. Now those companies are way bigger, right? Fitbit just got purchased by Google for, I forget, over $2 billion. Apple's a $1 trillion company. Even now Amazon is getting into the wearable game, and even rumors this week on Facebook, and that seemed really, really credible. And so I think, what we feel like the advantage is actually all that hard work we did to get all these sensors in a location on your finger, that has a much better signal quality than your wrist. And I think for all these healthcare applications in the future, we're actually going to be able to do them a little bit better and more accurate, than the other wearables. And I think, we look to double down on those efforts this year and the following years, and helping humanity understand their health.
Will you need new devices, or is it strictly a coding thing with the app to be able to take the data you're already creating with the ring?
Yeah, I think, look, we constantly are always, pushing on the software side. I think people may say, "Oh, that's a wearable company," or a hardware company. Like people thought of Fitbit. I completely disagree. We're a health data company. We're really a health company, and so data and software. I totally believe in machine learning. The future is AI, and data science, and I think we've done more and more in the app experience to launch some of those features, tracking activity, having that automatically be detected on what workout you may have just done. That's all done in software. It's all been software enhancements. We'll definitely always look to make new hardware investments and new sensor technology as it comes out. But I think the most of what we can do is going to be done really on the software side.
Well, terrific. So the price is about $300, 299 for the most part, but you have some
Correct.
different models out there.
Yeah, we have, our basic rings and colors start at $299, and some of our premium finishes like, gold and a stealth black ring, more of a matte black ring, are $399. I think, the Apple Watches sort of start at $400, for the newest model, and so I think, consumers are willing to really pay. In fact, they're frustrated, because they can't understand their health, and so I think as a startup, it is differentiated technology. It does cost us more to make, a custom device on the finger, and do a lot of that sort of, by hand. So I think, we want to make it more accessible over time, to everyone. That's part of our goals. But I think also at the same time, there's a real cost to differentiated technology.
Well, the website is ouraring.com, OURA ring.com. Congratulations on the innovations, Harpreet Singh Rai. Thank you for taking the time with us.
Thank you, Fred. Appreciate it.
Now, this. It takes a lot of listening to build a better radio, and that's just what the folks at C. Crane have done. Bob Crane and his crew, nestled among the rivers and tallest trees in the world in Fortuna, California, have made a habit of listening to their customers. And that's just what they've done in building the CC Skywave SSB, the Swiss Army knife of portable radios. For everyday listening to AM or FM in the yard or patio or on the nightstand without having to drain a mobile phone battery, it's a great companion. But it is also a companion equipped for NOAA weather information and alerts that can be life-saving. You can listen to FEMA and Coast Guard transmissions too, Beyond all of that, you can tune into shortwave signals from around the world. It's compact, easy to take with you, and built to last. The CC Skywave SSB. Click on the link at Techstination.com.